So hi and welcome to another episode of Energy Bites with ELS. We did not release an episode last week because we were away on team building days with the whole ELS team, which was great and fun. But now we are back, and I thought we'd pick up on where we left it last time. So today I have our policy analyst, Shana Kessers, and our business strategy consultant, Carl Rosenberg, with me. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Hello.
So my name is Elina Kinsey. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ELS Analysis. So let's get started and pick up on where we left things last episode. And I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on recent developments and what has kept you busy the last couple of weeks. Carl, let's start with you.
If I remember correctly, I left off last week talking about the offshore wind inquiry, and that has indeed been handed over to the government. And
in Sweden, you mean?
In Sweden, exactly.
Yeah.
And the inquiry is going to present an auction system, providing more predictability and making the decision-making in the permitting process more proactive. And something that we do know is missing, however, is that there won't be any risk-sharing mechanism, partly because that wasn't part of the inquiry's mandate from the government. And something that comes to mind is the outcome of the Danish auction, which ended up with 0 bids. And that did not include any CFD mechanism either. In contrary, it included a 20% mandatory stake by the government, and there was also quite tough penalties in case of delays. What are your thoughts about that?
So my thoughts on that is that the market is quite clear that they need some kind of risk share mechanism in order to see a route to market for offshore wind. And I do think that many governments that are now trying to sort of adjust or introduce new legislative frameworks need to take this on board if they want to see a strong build-out of offshore wind.
Yeah, it's evident that the market conditions aren't there for a developer to go merchant. And in other Swedish news, the government's nuclear risk-sharing memorandum has just returned from consultation. And the news has not been dominated by optimism. Rather, it has been dominated by skepticism and industry demands of a broad energy agreement. The Energy Market Inspectorate rejected the proposal. The Swedish Energy Agency and the Swedish TSO, Svenska Kraftnät, wrote that the proposal must be further investigated before it can be implemented. And that is very clear. Much work is still ahead for it to be turned into an outright legislative proposal.
A question on that, Carl. Would you have expected, or do you think the government rather would have expected the market to embrace this on a broader level, or do you think they were prepared for this kind of criticism coming from both their own expert and agencies, but also from the market as a whole?
Well, I do think that this was very much a so-called test balloon, sort of testing the market. The government is aware that the developers and investors are hesitant. I mean, that there was already reports on that last year. There will be large incentives needed in order for anyone to jump in. And, given the market conditions, given the political risk, there is no broad energy agreement. In the contrary, the government is quite reluctant to enter into negotiations with the Social Democrats. They're demanding that the Social Democrats declare their position publicly. However, that would kill any negotiation process. If the Social Democrats say that they're against nuclear, the government won't enter into talks. And if they, on the other hand, say that they are for the nuclear power proposal, that would put the Social Democrats in quite a tough position. It would make it very difficult for the Social Democrats to leave any potential negotiations. We're still in a political gridlock, and the government did not only say that they were going to build nuclear, they said that they would sort of end the political gridlock on energy policy that has been going on for the past 40 years or so.
Yeah, the how is then the question, because it seems like there is no system or proposal that kind of can match what they are providing for the nuclear business. So I mean, once again, it's pretty frustrating for everyone that this has become such a political heated question or issue, rather than just finding a common ground where everyone would benefit, which, I mean, we 100% believe that there is, a system that could work in favor of that. But let me go to you now, Shana, on more of the European level. What kind of your thoughts on the recent developments, and where you also left your comments last time in the last episode?
Yeah, exactly. So last week we focused very much on the EU's second hydrogen auction, which actually opened last week and will close late in February next year. We're going to have to wait for the results, but let's just remind that Austria, Lithuania and Spain joined the auction as a service mechanism. So these three countries will be allocating even more funds to hydrogen projects. So that's something we're going to have to follow next year. But I think we need to tackle on the investment climate in renewables in general in Europe, but especially in Poland, because they recently introduced amendments to their Wind Energy Act.
Is that both offshore and onshore wind?
No, this time they've been amending the Wind Energy Act regarding onshore, but they actually introduced amendments, I think, a couple of months ago on offshore wind too. But this time, the main focus of the amendments is the abolition of one of the rules concerning the distance between residential buildings and the wind turbines, which is actually something that was locking many investments in the country. So now the new rule is actually 500 meters between the turbines and the residential buildings, with the objective to unlock all these investments that are currently paralyzed. They have also streamlined the permitting process. Well, rather than streamlined, they have solved an issue which was long affecting investments again, and it is that the permitting process for onshore wind projects was found in two different legislations, and there were some differences between them. So now one of the processes, actually the one on the Wind Energy Act, has been abolished, and the new rules under the Planning Act prevail. So that was a regulatory concern affecting investments in the country and has been solved now. But going back to the distance rules, even if that's going to unlock many of the investments that were blocked, actually they have introduced strict rules regarding the Natura 2000 sites. Because before it was only forbidding to build wind parks, of course, on these sites and in national parks, but you could do so in the proximities. And now in these new amendments, they have introduced a new distance rule for this. So there has to be 500 meters between Natura 2000 sites and new projects, and that was not there before. It's also necessary to see that Poland has 20% of their land protected under Natura 2000, so that could affect, in part, investment. So we can talk about liberalization, but with some remarks.
So that's very positive news for the renewable uptake in Poland then.
Yeah, exactly. And also for hydrogen, because earlier in summer, they introduced the regulatory framework for hydrogen projects in the country. So we can find a very positive investment climate in Poland. But not only in Poland, we can expect to see that on the EU level too, because we've been discussing that a lot at ELS. But this new Commission's term is very much focused on implementation rather than on introducing new legislation concerning renewables. Actually, in the first 100 days of this new term, we can expect the Clean Industrial Deal from the Commission, and that's going to be very focused on implementation and boosting investments and try to get some money going within the sector. So I think it's very positive, actually, that Poland is taking on the presidency of the Council starting in January, because if that climate continues as it is, it can be very good to push all these initiatives from the Commission and actually have a very much positive investment climate in the EU.
Yeah, that could be a very good balancing act. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the Commission has pushed a bit back on the renewable energy agenda, sort of talking more about stopgaps, delaying targets. For sure. So this could be a way to sort of sway it back into the previous Commission.
Yeah, for sure. And we were discussing 2 weeks ago in our last podcast that the industry, at least for the hydrogen sector, was very concerned about the detailed regulatory environment. So I think that this new focus on implementation can be very good, not only for hydrogen and in onshore wind, but also overall for renewables?
Yeah, very good to see Poland, a big economy and an important country in Europe, moving, pushing forward.
Yeah,
that's
for
very
sure.
interesting. So especially in a market and economical situation which is rather tough for renewable uptake at the moment.
Yeah.
Definitely, and we've seen developments in the wider Baltic area. The Polish offshore wind sites are progressing, but we've also seen developments in Estonia launching their auction for offshore wind, and Lithuania has also relaunched its second offshore wind auction with results expected in 2025.
Yeah, and actually Germany, as you might know, they have two different offshore wind sites, the pre-developed ones and the ones that are not pre-developed by the state. And actually I think it was last week that the water agency presented the environmental impact assessment for two sites, which are pre-developed by the state and are to be auctioned in 2 years' time, I think. So, agree 100% that we're seeing some developments in the Baltics.
Yeah, and that's also very interesting because obviously we know that Germany has a massive domestic demand for green power, but what we are seeing in those other countries is a much more focus on export. So that's also interesting for the whole region as such.
Yeah, for sure.
And something for the Swedish government to keep in mind. The Swedish Energy Agency was tasked with the hydrogen coordination, and that has now been concluded. As many of you might know, it has produced two reports, one about the hydrogen infrastructure and the second one about sort of developments in hydrogen, both nationally and internationally. And the coordination concluded, stating that we need indeed more clear national direction. So this is something for the government to spend the next 2 years working on.
Absolutely. And I'm just sitting here thinking when I hear our discussion today that from week to week, we are seeing sentiment kind of changing. And that also, I think, has an impact on our sentiment also for how we are viewing sort of the investment possibilities and opportunities. But that's the most important thing here is I don't think the market conditions or the economics of these new technologies are changing that much. It's really the political signals that comes out from different governments that makes you change your kind of attitude and sentiment towards investment. So that's really, really interesting. So usually on our podcast, or the idea with our podcast is that we are going to cover both sort of investment sentiment, policy development, but also market development, with huge focus obviously on Europe. But Siddharth, our market analyst that usually gives us his view on recent market developments, are on holiday. So I will have to step in and give a few very quick takeaway and follow-ups on what we discussed last episode. So we did touch upon European gas storage levels, and Sid's view was at the time that the storage levels were falling in a pace that most probably would lead to storage levels below the 5-year average by now. And he was proved right, as we now see storage levels below both 2023, 2022 and 2021 years levels for the same time of the year. And to be more precise, inventories are now at 85% full, about 10% lower than this time last year. We are still well above 2020 years levels, but the balance is obviously tight. And as we touched upon last episode, this coupled with the geopolitical situation will keep the market tense and very reactive to any weather developments. But on the geopolitical front, worth mentioning is the collapse of the Syrian regime over the weekend. Syria is obviously not a significant oil and gas exporter, but its proximity to other oil-producing regions and possible implication for transit could impact oil price movements. And this whole combination of increasing political instabilities around the world is troublesome for the whole European energy complex, I would say, particularly when it comes to gas storage levels that are going down in a rather speedy pace, and we have a long time left of the withdrawal season. This is, of course, makes the whole European energy markets, including electricity and carbon, sensitive to any news, let it be weather, let it be political. So that was just my quick take from kind of a very macro market development. And I'm looking forward to have Sid back in, I don't know, not before Christmas, but after that, and he will give you more detailed information about sort of our outlook, views and prices and so on. But I think it's time to end this podcast. So let's end it with some final thoughts and a few words on what we will keep our eyes on the coming week. Let's start with you, Carl.
Well, I think my eyes is going to remain on the same topics. The offshore wind inquiry will be publicly available. Secondly, I'm going to have a look at how the Danish government will respond to the fact that its previous offshore wind auction received 0 bids. Are they going to revise the structure? Are they going to revise the penalties, make them a bit softer? Are they going to introduce a CFD? Are they going to look into the 20% state co-ownership requirement? And then, of course, I'm going to have a look at the nuclear risk inquiry. How is the Swedish government going to respond to the consultation round? And then, of course, I'm going to have a look at the upcoming environmental inquiry, looking into streamlined permits with regards to the Swedish Environmental Act.
So many things on your plate, in other words. And I do think I just want to pick up quickly on what you said regarding Denmark, because we saw a completely new sort of revision of the UK auction in allocation. I think it was 4 when there were no bids coming in, and they revised it to sort of meet market demands in the next round. And it would be interesting to see whether that will happen in Denmark as well, or if they just kind of, keep to their principles. But Shana, leave it to you now.
Yeah, we'll keep our eyes on the investment climate throughout Europe, both from a legislative and a market perspective. And we definitely hope for a proactive EU in boosting these on the regulatory side. And we'll also be looking at Poland's agenda to shape and speed up all these developments.
Sounds great, guys. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
And look forward to next Monday when we meet again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.